Hello. We are going to be going through solving quadratic equations graphically and by completing the square. Graphically is pretty easy. You just put it into your calculator. So we're going to focus mainly on completing the square right here. So we know that when we're solving quadratic equations, we can do some of them by factoring. The ones we can do by factoring have what are called rational roots. So we know we can solve some quadratic equations by factoring. These equations have roots which are rational. Not all quadratics have equations that are rational, however. Some of them have irrational, like a perfect square root that's not a perfect square, or pi, or some number like that. Or others have roots that are imaginary. So they have that lowercase I in them. Another method of solving these quadratics is called completing the square, which is what we're going to talk about right now. So the steps for completing the square. The first thing that I want you to write is when you are completing the square. Put a little note right here. You cannot have a coefficient on x squared. There cannot be anything in front of your x squared term. It has to be all by itself. So we'll get to exactly what you have to do with that in just a minute. So to complete the square for any quadratic expression where you have x squared plus bx equals c, we want to follow the steps below. Okay, so looking at our first example right down here. You want to take and move your c term to the other side. So we want to go ahead and we want to add 11 to both sides. So we're going to end up with x squared plus 6x. I'm going to leave a space here, equals 11, because these canceled out. Now we want to look at step 1. Find 1/2 of b, the coefficient of x. So the coefficient of x here is 6. So we want to take half of 6. Oops. So half of 6 gives us 3. And then we want to square that. So 3 squared is 9. So we want to add 9 to both sides. Plus 9, plus 9. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So now we have x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 20. The quadratic that we just created, we can actually factor. And what happens is actually really, really nice. So we're going to have our x's out in front. We're going to have 2 pluses in this case. And now we need factors of 9 that get us to 6. In this case, it will be 3 and 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 plus 3 is 6. And this equals 20. Well, another way to write this would be x plus 3 in parentheses squared equals 20. To get rid of a squared, we can take the square root of both sides, and you'll end up with x plus 3 equals, well, the square root of 20 can be broken down into 4 times 5, so we'll have 2 radical 5. I'm going to move this up here for us so we have a little more room. So x plus 3 equals, I apologize, I have to go back for a second. This should be plus or minus 20 because you have a positive square root and a negative square root. So it would be plus or minus 2 square root of 5. Now to get that x all by itself, the last thing you have to do is subtract 3. Subtract 3. So you'll have x equals, and you can write this as either negative 3 plus or minus 2 square root of 5, or if you leave it as plus or minus 2 square root of 5 minus 3, that's acceptable as well. So either one of those are perfect for your answer. Now people get really frustrated with completing the square, it's not a difficult concept. You just need to take it step by step. So we're going to do another example. So our next example here is x squared minus 8x plus 24. So we want to go ahead and check really quick. Is there anything in front of our x squared there? No, we're good. We want to move our c to the other side, so we're actually going to subtract 24, subtract 24. So we'll have x squared minus 8x, I'm going to leave a space, equals negative 24. Now my b term here is 8. So I want to do 8 divided by 2, which is 4, and then I want to do 4 squared, which is 16. So I'm going to add 16. I'm going to add 16 to both sides. Whatever you do to one side of an equation, you have to do to the other. So on the right here, negative 24 plus 16 is negative 8. On the left here, we can factor this. Now, like I said before, the nice thing is that when you factor this, it's going to be the exact same thing twice. So in front is always going to be an x, and then you actually want to take this piece right here. Okay, because 4 times 4 gives you 16. Negative 4 and negative 4 gives you negative 8, so minus 4. And that'll happen every single time. You'll have your x's go in the front, and the square root of this goes in the back. So we're going to take the square root of this side, the square root of this side. We'll have x minus 4, because the square and the square root cancel, equals plus or minus the square root of negative 8. Well, negative 8 can be simplified down into the square root of negative 4 and the square root of 2. So we have plus or minus now. So x minus 4 is plus or minus, the square root of negative 4 is 2i, and then we have a square root of 2 on the end still. We're going to add 4, and we're going to get an answer of x equals either 4 plus or minus 2i radical 2, or if you don't feel like switching them around, you can have plus or minus 2i radical 2 plus 4. Both of those are acceptable. The top one is a little nicer, but it doesn't matter. They're equivalent forms, so both get you to the same place. So if I were to give you another quick example, let's just say x squared minus 14x equals, let's say, 3. You would do 14 divided by 2, negative 14 divided by 2, and that would give you negative 7. Negative 7 squared is 49. So you're going to add 49 to both sides. But the important part is when you factor this left side now, I can tell you right away that it's going to be x minus 7 squared because I figured out what this was right here. That number is what goes on the second piece here every single time. We're going to do one more example. And this one's going to be a little trickier, only because it's in a different order. And if you look in front of our x here, now we have a negative 2. So what we want to do right off the bat is we want to go through and divide everything by negative 2. Divide by negative 2. Divide by negative 2. Every single piece of it. So in the front here, these will cancel, and we'll just have x squared. 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2, equals 8x divided by negative 2 is negative 4x. We need to do a little rearranging. We want to get this piece to this side, and we want to get this piece to this side. So to do that, we're going to add 2, and we'll have x squared equals negative 4x plus 2. And now we want to move our 4x back over. Plus 4x plus 4x. These are not like terms, so we're going to have x squared plus 4x equals, oops, I'm going to leave a little space there, equals 2. So we're going to add something here and add something here. Our b term is 4, so we're going to do 4 over 2, which is 2, and then 2 squared is 4. So we're adding 4, adding 4. We can factor this down. It's going to be x. Over here we have a positive 2, so that's what goes in the second part, plus 2 squared equals 6. I'm going to bring us up here so we have a little more room. So we have x plus 2 squared equals 6. I want to take the square root of both sides. Those will cancel and I'll be left with just x plus 2 equals the square root of 6, plus or minus the square root of 6. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides to get x all alone, and my answer will be x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 6 as my final answer. Again, if you didn't switch them around and you had plus or minus radical 6 minus 2, that would be okay as well. But this first one is a little bit better. The most important thing is knowing that you want to take half of b and then square it to figure out what you add on to both sides. We'll do some practice with this tomorrow. It's not super complicated, but it can be a little tricky at times. So we are going to do some more practice. Have a wonderful evening.